The sterile silence of the precinct, broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant chatter of dispatch, often felt louder to Detective Alex Thorne than any city street. He moved through it with a practiced ease, a man whose life had been carved into precise, predictable routines. His desk was always clear, his case files meticulously organized, his coffee brewed to the exact shade of midnight. Yet, beneath the veneer of order, an insistent ache persisted, a hollow space in his chest where a four-legged Shadow used to be. It had been 6 months since Shadow, his K-9 partner, had been forcibly retired. 6 months since the department, citing nebulous budget cuts and the alleged lack of proper aftercare facilities, had signed away years of loyal service with a bureaucratic flick of a pen. Alex had fought it. Of course, he'd argued, pleaded, even threatened resignation. But the decision was final, handed down by Captain Maxwell himself, a man whose ambition far outweighed his compassion. "These dogs are assets, Thorne, not family," Maxwell had intoned, his words chilling Alex to the bone. To Alex, Shadow was more than an asset. He was a silent confidant, a fierce protector, a furry extension of his own will. They had faced down armed suspects, sniffed out hidden explosives, and navigated the labyrinthine streets of the city. An unbreakable team. Shadow, a German shepherd with eyes that held both the wisdom of an old soul and the playful glint of a puppy, had been by his side through the best and worst of calls. He remembered Shadow's powerful, confident strides next to him, the way the dog would nudge his hand for a scratch behind the ears after a particularly grueling shift, the sheer joy in his bark when they found a missing child. Now, that presence was gone, replaced by an emptiness that no amount of paperwork or late-night patrols could fill. Alex found himself making regular, almost ritualistic, detours past the old K-9 training grounds. The scent of damp earth and distant pine needles still clung to the air, a ghost of familiar smells. He'd stand by the chain-link fence, watching the new recruits, younger officers with their eager, clumsy pups, and a bittersweet pang would seize him. He saw Shadow in every powerful leap, every focused sniff, every unwavering gaze. These dogs gave everything, their very lives, to protect and serve. To simply discard them when their working days were done felt like a profound betrayal, a stain on the badge they all wore. His current assignment was a string of petty larcenies, a dull, repetitive grind that did little to engage his sharp mind or quell the restless energy born of his quiet grief. He found himself picking at the edges of the police report, noting the lack of proper protocol, the shoddy records. It was a coping mechanism, a way to channel his frustration into something tangible, something he could control. He believed in order, in justice, in doing things the right way, and the way Shadow and countless other K-9s had been treated was profoundly wrong. He'd tried to visit Shadow after the forced adoption. The department had provided an address and a phone number for the new owner, a Mr. Thomas Miller. Alex had called repeatedly, left messages, but his calls went unanswered. When he drove by the address, a quiet suburban house on the outskirts of town, he saw no signs of a dog. No dog run, no toys in the yard, no telltale scratch marks on the door. A chill of unease had settled over him then, a tiny, nagging doubt that he'd tried to dismiss. He wanted to believe Shadow was safe, happy, enjoying his well-deserved retirement. But the silence, the lack of a response from Mr. Miller, gnawed at him. He'd even considered going door to door, asking neighbors. But he was told explicitly by Maxwell to respect the new owner's privacy. The official line was that Shadow had a loving home, a quiet retirement. Alex wanted to believe it, desperately, but a detective's intuition, honed over years of uncovering hidden truths, told him otherwise. The days blurred into weeks, then months. Alex buried himself deeper in his work, using the long hours as a shield against the thoughts that crept in during the quiet moments. He'd sometimes catch himself reaching for Shadow's leash, only to pull his hand back, remembering the phantom weight of Shadow's head on his lap, the rhythmic thump of his tail against the floorboards of the patrol car. These were the echoes that haunted him. He was a man adrift, anchored only by his unwavering belief that every life, human or animal, deserved respect, dignity, and justice. And somewhere, deep down, a quiet, almost imperceptible voice whispered that Shadow's story wasn't over. Not yet. The call came on a Tuesday, a day like any other, yet destined to alter the course of Alex Thorne's quiet, aching existence. He was sifting through the dreary details of another cold case, the kind that slowly suffocated hope, when the dispatcher's voice crackled through his earpiece, pulling him back to the present. Unit 73 neglected animal report. Unconfirmed canine. Possibly starved. Address 17B Cypress Lane, outskirts of Harmony Creek. Alex jotted down the address without much thought. Neglected animal reports were unfortunately common, often heartbreaking, but rarely did they involve anything beyond a rundown kennel or a dog left too long in the heat. Still, he felt a familiar flicker of dread, a premonition that always seemed to precede the truly difficult cases. Harmony Creek. The name itself felt like a cruel joke, a stark contrast to the desolate, forgotten corner of the county it described. It was a place where progress seemed to have stalled, where dirt roads eventually gave way to overgrown tracks, and where the few scattered houses looked like they were actively trying to disappear into the tangled undergrowth. Alex dimly recalled the address from an old, minor case file, a property dispute. Years ago, nothing significant. Yet, a vague sense of unease settled over him as he keyed the location into his patrol car's GPS. The sky mirrored his mood, a heavy, bruised purple. It wept a fine, persistent drizzle that blurred the windshield and slicked the asphalt. The wipers worked furiously, a rhythmic scrape against the glass. Yet they couldn't clear the gloom that seemed to hang in the air. The road narrowed, asphalt giving way to gravel, then to a deeply rutted dirt track. Branches, heavy with rain, slapped against the side of his cruiser, leaving streaks of mud and leaves. The silence outside the car was oppressive, broken only by the hum of the engine and the drumming of rain. As he drove deeper into the rural expanse, the scattered, run-down properties grew further apart. Mailboxes leaned precariously. Their numbers faded, almost illegible. Overgrown fields stretched out like forgotten dreams, punctuated by skeletal trees that clawed at the gray sky. This wasn't just the outskirts of town, it felt like the edge of the world, a place where things went to be forgotten. The GPS chirped, signaling his arrival. Alex slowed the cruiser, peering through the rain-streaked glass. Before him stood a ramshackle property, barely visible through a shroud of untamed bushes and a sagging, broken fence. What looked like a collapsed shed or garage slumped to one side, its corrugated metal roof peeling away like old skin. The house itself was a derelict nightmare windows, boarded up with mismatched plywood, a front door hanging askew, and a general air of decay that suggested years of abandonment. A prickle of apprehension traced its way up Alex's spine. This was more than just neglect. This was outright desolation. He cut the engine, plunging the immediate vicinity into an eerie silence, save for the persistent patter of rain in the distant, almost imperceptible whisper of wind through the skeletal branches. He grabbed his flashlight and his trauma kit, the weight of the familiar equipment a small comfort against the growing unease in his gut, as he pushed open the squeaking gate, the rusted hinges groaning in protest. A faint, almost imperceptible scent hit him. It wasn't the typical stench of decay or rot from an abandoned house. No, this was something else. Something sharper, more pungent, yet subtly familiar. It was the scent of animal, unwashed and uncared for. But beneath that, something deeper. Something that made a cold dread creep into his heart. He moved cautiously, flashlight beam cutting through the deepening twilight. The property was a junkyard of broken dreams, overturned wheelbarrows, rusty tools, discarded tires half buried in the mud. He called out, his voice swallowed by the vast emptiness. "Hello, police, anyone home?" Only the drip, drip, drip of rainwater answered him. Then he heard it. A faint whimper, almost swallowed by the rain, but unmistakable. It was weak, hesitant, but undeniably canine. His heart seized, a tight knot of anticipation and fear. He quickened his pace, following the sound around the side of the decaying house. Past a cluster of overgrown bushes, towards a small, dilapidated structure tucked away from the main building. The structure was a crude, makeshift kennel, little more than a collection of splintered planks and rusty wire mesh, offering scant protection from the elements. As his flashlight beam cut through the gloom and settled on the interior, Alex Thorne stopped dead in his tracks. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The rain, the cold, the dreary landscape all faded into a blurry background. Huddled in the back, barely moving, a heap of matted fur and protruding bones, was a dog. A large dog, a German shepherd. And in its eyes, even through the film of pain and resignation, Alex saw it, a familiar spark, a recognition that sent a jolt of disbelief, then a wave of crushing sorrow. Through his entire being, it couldn't be. It absolutely could not be. But the dog, with a monumental effort, lifted its head, and a tiny, almost inaudible whine escaped its emaciated frame. His name was Shadow, and he was starving, abandoned, and undoubtedly broken. The air crackled with unspoken questions, with a grief so profound it threatened to swallow Alex whole. He stood frozen, his flashlight beam trembling slightly, illuminating the horrifying tableau before him. This wasn't just a German shepherd, it was his German shepherd. The unmistakable patch of white fur on Shadow's chest, like a misplaced cloud, the way his ears, though now drooped with exhaustion, still retained that unique, slightly asymmetrical tilt, every detail. No matter how obscured by filth and suffering, screamed Shadow. A guttural cry, more animal than human, tore from Alex's throat. Shadow, oh, God, Shadow, the dog, startled by the sudden outburst, flinched, then with immense effort, tried to lift his head higher. A weak whimper escaped him, a sound that tore at Alex's heart. Shadow's eyes, once bright with intelligence and boundless energy, were now clouded with pain and a desperate, fragile hope. They flickered, recognizing the familiar voice. The scent of his partner, a tiny, almost imperceptible wag of his tail, just a twitch against the damp. Cold earth confirmed the impossible. Alex dropped to his knees. Heedless of the mud and the biting cold, he moved slowly, deliberately, as if approaching a skittish deer. "It's me, boy, it's Alex." His voice was hoarse, thick with emotion. He reached out a trembling hand, slowly, offering the back of it for Shadow to sniff. Shadow's nose, once so keen, barely registered the contact. But then, a low, rumbling groan, a ghost of a purr, vibrated from his chest. He nudged his head against Alex's palm, a gesture so familiar, so utterly Shadow, that it brought tears stinging to Alex's eyes. The dog was a skeletal wreck, his ribs starkly visible beneath matted, dirt-caked fur. His hips jutted out at unnatural angles. Every breath seemed to be a monumental effort. He was a shadow of his former self, a cruel mockery of the powerful, vibrant K9. Alex remembered. "Who did this to you, boy?" Alex whispered, his voice cracking. The question hung in the air, a burning indictment against an unseen culprit. The rage that simmered beneath his grief was a cold, hard knot in his stomach. How could anyone, especially someone entrusted with the care of such a magnificent creature, abandon him to this slow, torturous death? The image of Mr. Thomas Miller, the anonymous, benevolent adopter, shattered into a million pieces. This wasn't neglect. This was calculated cruelty, carefully. Alex tried to assess Shadow's condition. The dog was barely responsive, his body trembling. Not from cold alone, but from extreme weakness. Every muscle ached just watching him. Alex knew he couldn't move Shadow too quickly or roughly. He needed to get him to a vet, and fast. He pulled off his patrol jacket, despite the chill, and gently laid it over Shadow's shivering form. The thin fabric offered little warmth, but it was a gesture, a silent promise of protection. He then fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy with emotion, and dialed dispatch, his voice tight with suppressed fury. "This is Unit 73. I have a severe animal cruelty case at 17B Cypress Lane. Need an immediate animal control response, and an ambulance if possible for emergency transport. K9 is extremely malnourished and in critical condition." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "And send backup. I think we have a serious situation here." He didn't mention it was Shadow. Not yet. He couldn't bring himself to say it over the radio. Couldn't voice the raw, personal anguish that threatened to overwhelm his professional demeanor. While he waited, Alex tried to offer what little comfort he could. He spoke to Shadow in low, soothing tones, recounting old patrol stories, reminding the dog of their shared victories, their bond. "Remember that time, boy, when you sniffed out that meth lab under the old bridge, or that runaway kid hiding in the abandoned warehouse? You were always the best." Shadow? Always? He stroked the dog's head, feeling the sharp contours of his skull beneath the filthy fur. Each touch was a confirmation of the horror, a reminder of the vibrant life that had been so cruelly diminished. Shadow responded with a soft sigh, pressing his head weakly against Alex's hand. It was a sign of trust, of recognition, a silent plea for help. And Alex, looking into those pained, familiar eyes, felt an oath solidify in his heart. He would find out who did this. He would make them pay. No one abandoned a loyal K9, especially not his Shadow, and got away with it. This wasn't just a neglected animal report anymore. This was personal. This was a mission for justice. The distant wail of sirens, faint at first, then growing steadily louder, pierced the oppressive quiet. Help was coming. But for Alex, it wasn't just about rescue, it was about retribution. The sight of Shadow, his beloved partner, reduced to this skeletal, shivering husk, had ignited a fire in his soul. The long, silent ache of absence had been replaced by a burning inferno of purpose. This was a battle he would fight to the very end. The journey to the veterinary clinic was a blur of flashing lights and gut-wrenching anxiety for Alex. He cradled Shadow's head in his lap in the back of the animal control vehicle, murmuring reassurances, feeling the fragile beat of the dog's heart against his palm. Each shallow breath Shadow took was a testament to his incredible will to survive, but also a stark reminder of how close he was to losing that fight. The smell of neglect, foul and heartbreaking, still clung to Shadow's matted fur, a stark contrast to the comforting scent of his own police uniform, which he had draped over the emaciated form. They arrived at the Harmony Creek Veterinary Emergency Clinic, a brightly lit beacon in the storm-swept night. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman with kind, intelligent eyes framed by practical spectacles and a calm. authoritative demeanor. Met them at the entrance. Alex had called ahead, his voice strained and urgent, and she was clearly prepared. Her initial glance at Shadow's skeletal frame brought a subtle tightening to her lips. A shared understanding of the gravity of the situation. Detective Thorne, thank you for bringing him in so quickly, Dr. Reed said, her voice gentle but firm. Let's get him straight to an examination room. Prepare for an IV, rapid hydration, and blood work. Nurse, Alex watched, helpless but for his unwavering presence. As the vet tech gently lifted Shadow onto a gurney, the dog was too weak to even struggle. A heartbreaking sight for a creature once so powerful and vibrant. Shadow's eyes, though barely open, found Alex's, and a faint, almost imperceptible tail wag provided a tiny, fragile spark of hope in the sterile environment inside the examination room. The air hummed with quiet efficiency. Dr. Reed's hands moved with practiced grace, her expression a mix of professional assessment and deep compassion. She listened to Shadow's faint heart, palpated his distended abdomen, and gently examined his gums, which were pale and almost white. He's severely dehydrated and emaciated. Detective, she stated, her voice calm despite the grim prognosis. Body temperature is dangerously low. He's been without food and water for an extended period, possibly weeks. His muscle mass is completely depleted. We'll need to start him on a very slow refeeding protocol once we stabilize his electrolytes. Reintroducing food too quickly could be fatal. Alex nodded, his jaw tight. He's a canine doctor, my former partner. Shadow. Dr. Reed paused, her eyes widening slightly in recognition and a fresh wave of dismay. A police dog? That makes this even more abhorrent. Her gaze lingered on Shadow, a flicker of outrage in her professional assessment. He's a fighter, detective. I can see it in his eyes. He's been through a lot. But he's not giving up. As an IV line was carefully inserted into Shadow's frail leg, delivering life-saving fluids. Alex recounted the horrifying discovery at the derelict property. He omitted the personal connection to Shadow at first, sticking to the facts for the official record. But his voice betrayed the raw emotions simmering beneath. He described the deplorable conditions, the lack of any shelter, the sheer abandonment. Dr. Reed listened patiently, her expression growing increasingly grim. It sounds like he was left for dead, she concluded, her voice low. It's a miracle he held on this long. She scribbled notes on Shadow's chart, her brow furrowed in concentration. We'll do everything we can. Detective, but it will be a long road to recovery. He's incredibly weak, and his internal organs have likely taken a severe hit, despite the bleak assessment. Alex felt a fragile sense of relief. Shadow was here. He was safe. And he was receiving the best possible care. For the first time in hours, a tiny glimmer of hope pierced the darkness that had enveloped him. He squeezed Shadow's paw gently, feeling the dog's weak squeeze back. He's a survivor, Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. He always has been. He spent the next few hours by Shadow's side, watching the IV drip, listening to the quiet beeps of the monitors. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, a fierce protectiveness that had never truly waned. Even in Shadow's absence, while he also felt a burning resolve. This wasn't just about saving Shadow's life. It was about getting justice for him. Someone was responsible for this unspeakable cruelty, and Alex would leave no stone unturned until they were held accountable. The image of Mr. Thomas Miller flashed in his mind, now tinged with suspicion and a cold, hard anger. The official story of a benevolent adopter had just crumbled into dust. Dr. Reed returned periodically, checking Shadow's vitals, adjusting the drip. She seemed to understand Alex's silent vigil, offering words of encouragement and updating him on Shadow's slow, agonizing progress. He's stable for now, she finally said. Around dawn, her voice weary but firm. The next 24 to 48 hours are critical. He needs rest. You should try to get some, too. Detective, we'll call you immediately if there's any change. Alex hesitated, reluctant to leave his partner's side. But he knew Shadow was in capable hands, and he had a new mission, one that now burned brighter than any case he'd ever worked. He had to find out who did this. He had to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly. The first step was to trace Shadow's last known movements, to understand how a hero K9 had ended up starving and abandoned in the desolate wilderness of Harmony Creek. Justice would be served. For Shadow, leaving Shadow's side at the clinic was one of the hardest things Alex Thorne had ever done. Every instinct screamed at him to stay, to stand vigil until his partner was out of the woods. But a more potent force, a cold, unyielding resolve, propelled him forward. Shadow needed him to fight, and that fight began with uncovering the truth. Back at the precinct, the pre-dawn quiet offered a grim backdrop for his new, unauthorized investigation. He bypassed the usual bureaucratic channels, knowing full well that stirring up official inquiries this early would only invite unwanted attention and potential obstruction. This was personal, and for now, it had to remain off the books. He started with the K9 unit's records, pulling up Shadow's entire service history. From his initial training as a rambunctious pup to his distinguished years on the force. Each commendation, each successful search, each capture was a painful reminder of the betrayal. Then, he located the dreaded retirement file. The official narrative was a neat. Sanitized account K9 Shadow, badge number 718, honorably retired due to age and new departmental protocols, adopted by private citizen, Mr. Thomas Miller, of 42 Willow Creek Lane. Alex stared at the name, a fresh wave of cold fury washing over him. Mr. Thomas Miller, the phantom adopter, the name on the paperwork that stood between Shadow and a loving home. The address, 42 Willow Creek Lane, was the same quiet suburban house he'd visited months ago, the one that had shown no signs of a dog. He tried the phone number listed for Miller again. It rang 5 times, then clicked to a generic voicemail box. No name, no personalized greeting. Just a hollow, automated voice inviting him to leave a message. He hung up, his frustration mounting. This wasn't the behavior of a responsible pet owner, especially one who had supposedly adopted a decorated police dog. Next, Alex dove into the public records database. He searched for Thomas Miller at the Willow Creek Lane address. Nothing. No property ownership, no utility bills, no voter registration, no public records whatsoever tied to that name at that address. It was as if Thomas Miller simply didn't exist. A ghost in the system. The house itself was owned by a corporate entity, an LLC that Alex immediately flagged as suspicious. Why would a private citizen adopt a K9 through a shell company? His suspicions hardened into certainty. This wasn't a simple case of an owner abandoning a pet. This was calculated. Someone had deliberately falsified records, creating a paper trail to cover up Shadow's disappearance, and that someone had to be connected to the department, or at least have deep enough ties to access K9 retirement protocols. He then pulled up the departmental policy on K9 retirement. The new policy, implemented roughly a year ago, detailed a streamlined adoption process, emphasizing confidentiality for the adopter. This clause, which Alex had argued against vehemently at the time, was now glaringly obvious as a potential loophole for malfeasance. It allowed for anonymous adoptions, preventing any follow-up or welfare checks. It was a perfect cover. He ran a cross-check of other K9s retired under the new policy. There were surprisingly few in their district, only 4 others in the last year. He looked up their adoption records. 3 of them were listed with legitimate, verifiable owners. Families Alex knew had adopted retired K9s and cherished them. But the fourth, a powerful narcotics detection dog named Apollo, had also been adopted by an anonymous party. The name listed Miss Sarah Jenkins. Address in a different county, also a dead end. Another phantom. A chilling pattern began to emerge. Two K9s. Two seemingly anonymous adoptions. Two complete disappearances. And now, one found starving and abandoned. This was no coincidence. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, casting long, pale shadows across his cluttered desk, Alex knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed help from someone who could navigate the murky waters of corporate ownership and public records. Someone with a nose for a scandal and the ability to cut through red tape. And he knew exactly who that was. He packed up his notes, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The bureaucratic roadblocks, the vague responses, the outright deception, they all served to fuel his determination. The initial shock had given way to a burning need for justice, a righteous anger that thrummed beneath his skin. Shadow, fighting for his life in a vet clinic, deserved more than just survival. He deserved to have his story told, and for those who had wronged him to pay the price. Alex looked at the empty K9 kennel at the station, the one where Shadow's bowl and bed used to sit. The void was still there, but now it was filled with a fierce resolve. He wasn't just a detective anymore, he was an avenger. For Shadow, for Apollo, and for every other loyal K9 who might have been discarded like trash. The search for answers had just begun, and Alex Thorne would not rest until every piece of this horrifying puzzle was uncovered. Alex's first stop, after leaving the precinct, was Captain Robert Maxwell's office. The captain's domain was a meticulously ordered space, almost clinical in its precision, a stark contrast to the chaos Alex felt swirling within him. Maxwell, a man in his late 50s with a receding hairline and an air of quiet authority, looked up from his computer, his expression a carefully neutral mask. "Thorne, what can I do for you at this ungodly hour?" Maxwell's voice was smooth, betraying no hint of concern. "It's about Shadow, Captain," Alex stated, his voice flat, devoid of the usual pleasantries. He watched Maxwell closely, searching for any flicker of reaction. There was a subtle stiffening of the shoulders, a barely perceptible tightening around the eyes. "Ah, yes, the K9, Maxwell said, pushing his chair back slightly. "Tragic business. My condolences. Thorne, I heard the vet prognosis is challenging." "He's fighting," Alex countered, his gaze unwavering. "And I found him abandoned on some derelict property, starving, not in the care of Mr. Thomas Miller." Maxwell's composure seemed to waver for a fraction of a second. "Abandoned impossible. The adoption was thoroughly vetted. Mr. Miller was a private citizen who wished to remain anonymous, as is his right under the new policy." He gestured vaguely towards a stack of files on his desk. "All the paperwork is in order, is it?" "Captain." Alex leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Because Mr. Thomas Miller doesn't exist. The address provided is a shell company, and it seems another retired K9 Apollo, adopted under the same anonymous clause, has also vanished without a trace." Maxwell's face hardened. "Detective, I understand you're upset. Shadow was your partner, but you are treading on dangerous ground, making unsubstantiated accusations. The K9 retirement program was designed for efficiency and to protect the privacy of benevolent adopters. To suggest otherwise is an insult to this department, and to me personally. An insult. Captain, what about an insult to a dog who dedicated his life to this department, only to be left to die?" Alex's voice rose, a raw edge of fury breaking through his professional calm. "This isn't about privacy, Captain. This is about a cover-up. And I want to know why?" Maxwell pushed himself up from his desk, his posture suddenly rigid. "You are out of line. Detective, I suggest you focus on your assigned duties and leave the K-9 unit's administration to me. This investigation of yours is unauthorized and, frankly, unprofessional. I'm warning you. Thorne. The veiled threat was unmistakable. Alex felt a surge of cold anger. With all due respect, Captain, I consider the welfare of a K-9 who saved my life more than once to be very much my duty. And I'm not backing down. He turned to leave, but Maxwell's voice stopped him at the door. Think very carefully about who you're accusing. Thorne, there are powerful people in this city. People who prefer to operate without unnecessary scrutiny. The thinly veiled warning only solidified Alex's resolve. Maxwell's evasiveness, his quick defensiveness, and the blatant attempt to shut down the inquiry screamed of complicity. He wasn't just protecting the department, he was protecting himself. And someone else. Alex knew then that he was up against something far bigger than simple bureaucratic oversight or an irresponsible adopter. There was a deliberate effort to obscure the truth. A conspiracy at play, outside Maxwell's office. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. He was a lone wolf, operating outside official channels, pursuing a truth that powerful individuals clearly wanted buried. He couldn't trust his own chain of command. He needed someone on the outside, someone who wasn't beholden to departmental politics, someone with the resources and the fearlessness to expose corruption. His mind immediately went to Sarah Chen. Sarah was a senior investigative reporter for the City Tribune, known for her tenacity, her sharp intellect, and her unwavering commitment to justice. She had a reputation for digging relentlessly, for following every lead, no matter how obscure, and for not being intimidated by powerful figures. Alex had worked with her on a complex public corruption case a few years back, and he trusted her implicitly. She understood the intricate dance between the law enforcement and media, knowing when to be discreet and when to unleash the full force of public scrutiny. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over her contact. It was still early, but Sarah was notoriously an early riser, fueled by coffee and a relentless curiosity. He took a deep breath. This was a leap of faith, a step into uncharted territory that could jeopardize his career, but looking at the empty K-9 tags hanging on the hook by the door, the silent reminders of Shadow, he knew he had no choice. For Shadow, for Apollo, for the principle of what was right. He hit dial. The phone rang twice before Sarah's crisp. Professional voice answered, "Chen." "Sarah, it's Alex Thorne. I need to talk to you. I've got a story for you. A big one." A beat of silence, then a hint of intrigue in her voice. "Thorne, you don't call for small talk? What's going on?" "It's about a retired K-9, my old partner." "Shadow." Alex began, his voice rough with emotion. "I found him. Starving, abandoned. And what I'm starting to uncover is going to shock the entire state." The silence on the other end lasted a moment longer. Then Sarah's voice, sharp and suddenly fully engaged, cut through the line. "Tell me everything, Alex, every single detail." He knew, as he started to recount the harrowing events, that he had made the right call. The battle for Shadow's justice was about to go public. Sarah Chen listened, a rare silence on her end of the phone. As Alex recounted the harrowing tale, he spared no detail, from the desolate property and Shadow's skeletal form to Maxwell's evasiveness and the disturbing discovery of Mr. Thomas Miller being a phantom entity. When he finished, the only sound was the distant clatter of a newsroom coming alive. "Alex!" Sarah's voice was sharp, cutting through the emotional residue of his story. "This isn't just a story. This is a scandal. A major one. Abandoning hero dogs. That's going to outrage people from every walk of life. You've stumbled onto something huge." "I know," Alex replied, a grim satisfaction in his tone. "But I need your help. My hands are tied internally. Maxwell's already trying to shut me down. I need someone who can dig into corporate records, someone who can apply public pressure. Consider it done." Sarah stated without hesitation, I'll start pulling every public record I can find on this Thomas Miller. And that LLC you mentioned, my team has resources the police department doesn't, especially when it comes to untangling shell corporations. And I'll start reaching out to other retired K9 handlers. If this happened to Shadow and Apollo, it's possible it's happened to others. Their collaboration began immediately. A seamless merging of Alex's investigative instincts and Sarah's journalistic prowess. While Alex returned to the precinct, feigning a return to his petty larceny cases, his real work was happening in the shadows, communicating with Sarah through secure channels. He fed her information from internal databases he could still access discreetly. K9 service records, retirement dates, the names of officers involved in their adoption processes. Sarah, meanwhile, launched her own offensive. She assigned her most tenacious interns to cross-reference every anonymous adopter listed in K9 retirement records across the state. Looking for patterns, for inconsistencies, her contacts in the corporate registry proved invaluable. Within hours, she discovered that the LLC listed as the owner of 42 Willow Creek Lane. Phoenix Holdings Group was linked to a complex web of other shell companies, all registered to different P.O. boxes and managed by a single, obscure law firm known for its work with high-net-worth clients seeking privacy. This is classic money laundering territory, or at least a cover for something dirty. Sarah told Alex over an encrypted call later that day. These companies are designed to obfuscate true ownership, but I'm going to follow every thread, no matter how thin. As Sarah delved deeper into the corporate labyrinth, Alex focused on the human element. He quietly reached out to his network of retired K9 handlers. Many were like him, still deeply attached to their former partners, but often left feeling helpless by the new retirement policies. He found several who expressed concern about the fate of other K9s, some mentioning vague stories of dogs who had simply disappeared or whose adoptions had seemed rushed and secretive. One former handler, a grizzled veteran named Mark Peterson, confided in Alex about his partner, Caesar, a powerful bloodhound. Caesar was retired 6 months before Shadow, Mark told him, his voice laced with bitterness. He was adopted by some private individual through the department. They wouldn't even let me meet the guy. Said it was for privacy. I tried to follow up, but all my calls went straight to voicemail. Then the number was disconnected. Never heard from Caesar again. Mark's story mirrored Shadow's almost exactly. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to form a terrifying picture. It wasn't just a few isolated incidents, it was a systemic problem. Facilitated by the department's opaque new policies, the evidence mounted. Sarah discovered that Phoenix Holdings Group and its associated shell companies were all connected to one primary beneficiary, Marcus Thorne, no relation to Alex. But the name sent a shiver down his spine. Marcus Thorne was a titan of local real estate, known for his cutthroat business practices, his immense wealth, and his extensive political connections. He owned vast tracts of undeveloped land, industrial complexes, and had a reputation for getting whatever he wanted. Regardless of the ethical cost, Marcus Thorne, Alex repeated, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. He's untouchable. How could he be involved with K9 adoptions? That's what we need to find out, Sarah said, her voice grim. Why would a multi-millionaire developer bother with retired police dogs? It doesn't make sense unless there's a financial incentive, or something even more sinister. The revelation of Marcus Thorne's involvement elevated the stakes significantly. This wasn't just about a rogue adoption agent or a neglectful individual. This was about a powerful, influential figure potentially exploiting a system designed to protect loyal service animals. It explained Maxwell's sudden defensiveness, his subtle threats. Maxwell, Alex realized with a sickening lurch, was likely either complicit or terrified, as Shadow's condition at the clinic slowly, painfully improved. A testament to his indomitable spirit and Dr. Reed's tireless care, Alex felt a renewed surge of urgency. Shadow's recovery became a symbol of the larger fight. He was no longer just fighting for one dog, he was fighting for all of them, for the principle that loyalty deserved loyalty in return. And with Sarah Chen by his side, he finally felt like he wasn't alone in this increasingly dangerous battle. They were two unlikely allies, ready to expose a truth that threatened to shake the very foundations of the state. The name Marcus Thorne resonated through the hushed channels between Alex and Sarah, a jarring discord in the symphony of their investigation. It was one thing to chase a phantom adopter. It was an entirely different beast to confront a man whose influence stretched like a suffocating blanket over the city's power structures. Marcus Thorne, Sarah articulated, her voice tight with professional caution. He's not just a developer. Alex, he practically is the city council's major donor. His projects get fast-tracked. His concerns are heard. He's untouchable, or at least he presents himself as such. But why K9s? Alex mused, pacing his small apartment. Shadow was stable now, slowly gaining strength at the clinic, but the image of his starved form fueled Alex's relentless pursuit. It doesn't make any sense. A man with his resources. Why would he bother with retired police dogs, let alone abandon them? Sarah, with her characteristic tenacity, was already pulling up more data. That's what we're going to find out. My initial deep dive into Phoenix Holdings Group's financials shows an interesting pattern. They've been acquiring vast tracts of land, particularly abandoned industrial sites and remote rural properties, often through foreclosure or distressed sales. These are exactly the kinds of places that need serious security, and the cost for professional security firms for properties this size. Astronomical. A cold realization dawned on Alex. You think he's using the retired K9s as cheap security like disposable assets? It's more than a hunch, Sarah confirmed, her fingers flying across her keyboard. I cross-referenced some of the properties owned by Thorne's various LLCs with reports of increased nighttime activity or suspicious incidents. Several of them show a sudden cessation of incidents right after the acquisition. No new security contracts filed. No increase in patrol cars, just silence, and then, a few months later, new incidents start popping up elsewhere. The picture forming was monstrous. Marcus Thorne, a man who built empires, was apparently cutting corners by exploiting the loyalty of service animals. He'd adopt them under the guise of benevolence. Using the department's new lax policies as a perfect cover, he'd deploy them on his vast, often isolated, and sometimes dangerous properties. And when they outlived their usefulness, or became too old, too sick, or too much of a liability, he simply discarded them, like broken tools, like trash. This explains Maxwell's fear, Alex muttered, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. He's either in Thorne's pocket, or he's terrified of him. Maybe both. Sarah's next discovery was even more damning. She found a series of internal emails, leaked from a former employee of Thorne's, detailing budget meetings where security costs were a contentious issue. One email, specifically, mentioned a creative solution for canine security, proposed by Thorne's head of operations, a man named Bartholomew Bart Finch, known to be Thorne's ruthless right-hand man. The email then hinted at departmental connections that would ensure minimal overhead and maximum discretion. Minimal overhead and maximum discretion, Alex echoed, a sneer twisting his lips. That's Thorne's M.O. He wants the protection without the price tag, and without the paper trail. The evidence was mounting, slowly but surely, forming an undeniable pattern of exploitation and cruelty. Shadow wasn't just an isolated incident. He was a victim of a systematic abuse, a calculated scheme orchestrated by a man who valued profit above all else. The initial feeling of personal betrayal transformed into a burning need for public exposure, for justice not just for Shadow, but for every dog Marcus Thorne had discarded. Their investigation took them deeper into Thorne's empire. They discovered that several of the remote properties owned by Phoenix Holdings Group were located near areas with reported illegal dumping, suspected drug activity, or other illicit operations that would benefit from an unlisted, aggressive, and cheap security presence. The K-9s weren't just being used for property security, they were likely being used in high-risk environments, facing dangers without proper backup or care. Far from any official oversight, he's using them as silent enforcers. Sarah grimly concluded, and when they get injured, or too old to be effective, he just vanishes them. No paper trail, no veterinary bills, no adoption fees, pure profit. The callousness of it all was sickening. The sheer disregard for life, for the incredible bond between a K-9 and its handler, for the years of loyal service these dogs gave. It was an insult to everything Alex believed in, everything he had sworn to protect. The next step was to find irrefutable proof. Emails were good, corporate records were strong, but they needed something concrete, something that could tie Marcus Thorne directly to the abandoned K-9s. Something undeniable for a court of law. We need to find out where these dogs are going, Alex stated, a steely glint in his eyes. Where does Thorne dispose of them? There has to be a place. A common link. Sarah was already ahead of him. I'm looking into the property records of the anonymous adopters for Apollo and the other disappeared K-9s. If Thorne is behind it all, he's probably using the same pattern, or at least a similar type of property. Remote, easily forgotten, hard to access. The trail of deception was long and winding. But with each new piece of information, the image of Marcus Thorne as a heartless manipulator grew clearer. Alex felt a surge of adrenaline, not of fear, but of righteous anger. The powerful and the corrupt often believe themselves invincible, their crimes hidden beneath layers of money and influence. But they had underestimated Alex Thorne, and they had certainly underestimated the loyalty of a detective to his K-9 partner. This wasn't just a story anymore, it was a crusade. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a whispered confession from a soul burdened by guilt. While Sarah meticulously followed the digital breadcrumbs of Marcus Thorne's empire, Alex received a cryptic, anonymous message on his burner phone. K-9 handler. Knew about Caesar. Knew about Shadow. Meet me at the old abandoned quarry. Midnight, alone. It's about Thorne. The quarry was a desolate, moonless pit, its jagged edges silhouetted against a sky the color of bruised plums. Alex arrived alone, his hand instinctively resting on the grip of his service weapon, the damp night air prickling his skin. A figure emerged from the deeper shadows, a man in a worn baseball cap pulled low, his shoulders hunched. It was Frank Jenkins, a former K-9 handler who had retired a few years prior, a quiet man who had always kept to himself. Detective Thorne. Jenkins's voice was a rasp, thick with fear and regret. I shouldn't be here, but I can't live with it anymore. What they did, like what we allowed them to do. Alex kept his voice low, steady. Tell me, Frank, everything? Jenkins began to speak, his words tumbling out in a torrent of confession, painting a horrifying picture that surpassed Alex's darkest suspicions. Thorne. He approached Captain Maxwell about 2 years ago, said he needed security solutions for his properties. He heard about our K-9s, how effective they were, but he didn't want to pay for private security, or for the upkeep of the dogs once they were retired. A shiver of revulsion ran down Alex's spine. So he adopted them, Jenkins nodded, a bitter laugh escaping him. More like leased them, Maxwell, always looking for a way to cut corners and impress the brass. Saw it as a cost-saving measure. Thorne would adopt the dogs, technically taking them off the department's books. He'd use them on his properties, construction sites, abandoned warehouses, even some of his shadier dealings out in the sticks. He wanted tough dogs, the ones with a real bite. And when they were done, Alex prompted, his voice dangerously soft, Jenkins swallowed hard, his gaze darting nervously into the darkness. When they got old or sick, or injured on his properties, or just too much trouble, he'd tell Finch, his head of operations, to handle it. Maxwell knew, we all knew, unofficially. We saw the dogs go out, and we never saw them again. The official line was always happy retirement. Loving home. But we knew, we couldn't prove it. And no one wanted to cross Thorne or Maxwell. The betrayal was monumental. Not just by Thorne, but by the very system designed to protect these animals. Alex felt a cold, righteous fury building within him. How many dogs? Jenkins hesitated, then shook his head. A defeated gesture. At least half a dozen that I know of directly. Maybe more. Shadow was one of the last. And Apollo. Apollo was used on Thorne's new industrial park, where they were having trouble with scrap metal theft. He was a good dog, but he got a bad leg injury there. I heard Finch took him away one night. Said he was taking him to a specialist. Specialist for what to be discarded. The sheer callousness was breathtaking. These dogs, these heroes, were treated as expendable tools, their lives cheapened, their loyalty exploited. Alex thought of Shadow, shivering and starving, his body riddled with pain. Why are you telling me this now? Frank, Alex asked, his gaze piercing the darkness. Shadow, Jenkins said simply, his voice cracking. Seeing that picture of him? The news is starting to trickle out, even if it's not official. It broke me. Alex, I couldn't bear it anymore. Those dogs. They trust us. We let them down. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, his hand trembling as he offered it to Alex. This is a list. Properties, dates, names of handlers whose dogs went to Thorne, and the last known location where Finch takes them when they're no longer useful. An old condemned animal testing facility Thorne acquired years ago. It's remote. No one ever goes there. Alex took the paper, his fingers brushing Jenkins' cold ones. The list was a damning indictment, a direct link between Marcus Thorne, his shell companies, and the disappeared K9s. This was the proof they needed. Thank you, Frank, Alex said, his voice thick with gratitude and renewed determination. You did the right thing. Jenkins nodded, already fading back into the shadows. Just be careful, Detective. Thorne is a dangerous man. He'll come after you if you expose him. As Jenkins disappeared, Alex stood alone in the dark, the list clutched in his hand. The weight of it was immense, a responsibility he would not shirk. The truth was out, the dark secret, carefully hidden beneath layers of corporate deception and departmental complicity, had finally been revealed. Marcus Thorne, the untouchable magnate, was a monster who preyed on the most loyal and vulnerable. The cold dread that had accompanied Alex since finding Shadow was now replaced by a burning certainty. This was no longer just about Shadow's rescue. It was about exposing a systemic evil, about ensuring that every K9 past and present received the honor and protection they deserved. The fight had just escalated, and Alex Thorne was ready for war. The path forward was clear: confront Maxwell, expose Thorne, and rescue any other innocent K9 still trapped in his horrifying scheme. The cold light of dawn was breaking as Alex Thorne walked into the precinct, the crumpled list from Frank Jenkins burning in his pocket. He bypassed his desk, heading straight for Captain Robert Maxwell's office. There was no pretense of unofficial investigation anymore. This was a direct confrontation. Maxwell was already at his desk, nursing a cup of coffee, the faint scent of stale ambition clinging to the air around him. He looked up, his expression shifting from mild irritation to a flicker of apprehension as he saw the grim set of Alex's jaw. "Thorne, I thought I made myself clear yesterday," Maxwell began, attempting to assert his authority. You did, Captain, Alex countered, his voice steady and low. And I'm here to make myself clear. I know about Thorn, I know about the K9s, and I know about your involvement. Maxwell's face went pale. His coffee cup clattered against the saucer. I don't know what you're talking about. This is slander. Thorn, you're losing your mind. Alex slowly pulled the list from his pocket, unfolding it deliberately on Maxwell's polished desk. He didn't need to say anything. The handwritten names of K9s, the dates of their adoptions, the obscure property addresses, and the chilling annotation, last known location, Thorn's condemned facility. Maxwell stared at it, his eyes darting from the paper to Alex's face. The carefully constructed facade crumbled, replaced by a mixture of fear and dawning desperation. Where did you get this? This is impossible. It's all here. Captain. Alex pressed, his voice like cold steel. The paper trail from Thorn's shell companies, the disappearance of K9s like Apollo and Caesar, and now Shadow, found starving and abandoned, and a witness. Captain. Someone who couldn't live with the guilt anymore. Maxwell slumped back in his chair, running a trembling hand over his face. The smooth, confident leader was gone, replaced by a frightened man trapped by his own compromises. He made it sound so simple, so clean. Cost-saving measures. He called it a way to clear the department's books of aging assets without the public outcry of euthanasia or the expense of maintaining a full retirement program. Aging assets! Alex spat, his voice laced with venom. These are living, breathing creatures. Captain, they are heroes who put their lives on the line for us, and you let a man like Marcus Thorn turn them into disposable security guards. Then abandon them to die. He's powerful. Thorn. Maxwell suddenly burst out, his voice a frantic whisper. He threatened me. Said if I didn't cooperate, he'd expose things. Financial irregularities. A few questionable decisions I made early in my career. He promised a promotion. 2. Said he'd make sure I was seen as a visionary for streamlining the K9 program. The confession, though anticipated, was still a sickening blow. Ambition and fear, the classic motivators for betrayal. So you covered for him, Alex concluded, his voice heavy with disgust. You let him exploit our dogs, and then you let him discard them. How many? Maxwell. How many K9s ended up at his condemned facility? Maxwell wrung his hands. I don't know the exact number. Maybe 5 or 6. Thorn would just notify me when a dog was retired, and that Finch, his operations manager, would pick them up. I never asked questions. I just signed the papers. He looked up, his eyes pleading. Please, Thorn, don't go to the DA with this. It'll destroy me, my career, my pension. Everything. What about the dogs? Captain Alex retorted, his voice rising. What about their lives, their loyalty? What about Shadow, who's still fighting for every breath because of your questionable decisions and cost-saving measures? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You have one chance to make this right. Maxwell, tell me everything. Tell me where Thorn's holding the remaining dogs. Tell me how to catch him red-handed. Maxwell hesitated, weighing his options, his own ruined career, or the wrath of Marcus Thorn, the damning evidence on his desk, the haunted look in Alex's eyes, and perhaps a flicker of residual conscience seemed to tip the scales. He has a new shipment, a group of newly retired K9s. Maxwell stammered, his eyes wide with fear. He's consolidating them. Finch is taking them to that old animal testing facility today. He's planning to abandon them there tonight. Said it's the final phase of his current project. He doesn't want any loose ends. A cold dread washed over Alex, quickly replaced by a surge of desperate urgency. New K9s, ready to be abandoned? He had to move, and fast. Give me everything you have on that facility, Maxwell, Alex demanded, his voice firm. Layouts, access points, any security details, everything. Maxwell, defeated, nodded slowly. I have a file. Acquisition documents. Security reports. It's all in the locked cabinet. He fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking, as Maxwell unlocked the cabinet. Alex knew the game had changed. He had his confession, his insider information. Now he had to act. He pulled out his phone, already dialing Sarah. They had a lead, a critical window of opportunity to save more lives and bring down a monster. The confrontation with Maxwell was just the beginning. The real battle was about to commence. The phone call to Sarah Chen was brief, urgent, and devoid of pleasantries. Thorne's moving new dogs today to the condemned facility. Maxwell cracked. We need to move. Now. Sarah, ever the professional, absorbed the shocking revelation without a wasted breath. Understood. I'm mobilizing my contacts. You get official backup. This is a rescue and an arrest. We need everything. Alex didn't wait for permission. He went directly to the operations commander, Major Davies, a seasoned officer known for his integrity and directness. He laid out the entire gruesome story Shadow's discovery, the phantom adopters, Marcus Thorne's scheme, Maxwell's confession, and the chilling intelligence about the new K9s. He presented Jenkins' list, the corporate documents Sarah had unearthed, and the detailed layouts of Thorne's condemned facility provided by Maxwell. Davies, a man usually unflappable, listened with a deepening frown, his expression shifting from skepticism to disbelief, and finally to cold fury. The evidence was irrefutable. The betrayal of loyal service animals struck at the very heart of what they stood for. Thorne, Davies growled, slamming his fist lightly on the desk. That monster? And Maxwell. I'll deal with him personally later, right now. Our priority is those dogs. Within minutes. The precinct transformed into a hub of controlled chaos. A tactical team was assembled, their faces grim, their movements precise. Animal control was alerted, their specialized rescue unit put on standby. A district attorney was contacted, preparing warrants for Marcus Thorne and his associates. The news of a major operation, targeting a high-profile figure and involving abandoned K9s, spread like wildfire through the department. Fueling a collective sense of outrage and purpose, Alex, despite his exhaustion, felt a surge of adrenaline. He was no longer a lone detective fighting in the shadows. He was part of a coordinated effort, a unified force for justice. He suited up, grabbing his vest and gear, his movements sharper, more focused than they had been in months. Detective Thorne, you'll be led on the ground, Major Davies stated. His eyes fixed on Alex. You know these dogs. You know the facility. Our objective is rescue, then apprehension. Safety first, always. Understood, Major. Alex affirmed, a steely resolve in his eyes. He thought of Shadow, recuperating slowly at the clinic, and of the unknown K9s facing a similar horrific fate. They deserved better. The drive to the condemned facility was a tense, silent affair. The convoy of unmarked police vehicles, animal control vans, and even a plain white news van, Sarah's, no doubt cut through the morning mist. The facility, an abandoned animal testing lab acquired by Thorne years ago, was located deep within a forgotten industrial zone, its decaying buildings shrouded by overgrown weeds and rusted fences. It was a place designed for secrecy, a perfect stage for cruelty. As they approached, the air grew heavy with a sense of foreboding. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the crunch of tires on gravel and the occasional crackle of the police radio. Alex studied the facility blueprints Maxwell had provided. Multiple entry points, a complex of interconnected buildings, and a labyrinthine interior. They couldn't just storm it. They needed a clear strategy to secure the dogs and apprehend Thorne's men without causing further harm. Team A, you'll breach through the main gate. Secure the perimeter. Alex briefed over the comms, his voice calm and authoritative. Team B, you're with me. We'll enter through the utility tunnel, less visible. Our priority is the holding pens, identified as Building C on the schematics. Finch will likely be there. The plan was set. The stakes were impossibly high. Not only were they confronting a powerful, ruthless individual and his hired muscle, but they were also racing against time to save innocent lives. The K9s, trained for loyalty and protection, would likely be disoriented, possibly aggressive from neglect, or even frightened. They needed to be approached with extreme caution and compassion as they reached the final approach. The lead vehicle slowed. A faint, almost imperceptible whine carried on the wind. Then another, and another. The distinct mournful cries of dogs, faint but undeniable, echoed from within the decaying walls. A wave of cold anger washed over Alex. They were here, and they were suffering. Move out, Alex commanded, his voice tight with suppressed fury. Let's get those dogs! The rescue mission, fraught with danger and emotional intensity, was about to begin. The fate of Marcus Thorne's dark enterprise and the lives of several innocent K9s hung in the balance. Alex Thorne, the detective who had refused to forget his partner, was now leading the charge. Driven by a powerful blend of professional duty and deeply personal vengeance. There would be a reckoning. The air inside the condemned facility was thick with the stench of neglect and fear. Team B, led by Alex, moved swiftly and silently through the labyrinthine utility tunnels, the faint cries of the dogs growing stronger with every step. The facility was a decaying mausoleum of forgotten experiments, its walls scarred with rust and grime, every shadow a potential hiding place. Suddenly, a harsh light flared ahead, accompanied by gruff voices. Looks like we got some strays here, a voice sneered. Alex motioned for his team to halt, pressing himself against the cold, damp concrete wall, peering around a rusted support beam. He saw Bartholomew Bart Finch, Marcus Thorne's brutal head of operations, flanked by two burly, armed men. They were in a large, open area, what appeared to be an old research bay, and at least 5 distressed K9s were cowering in makeshift wire cages, their eyes wide with terror. They looked malnourished, their fur dull, their bodies trembling. One was Apollo, Alex realized. Recognizing the distinctive white blaze on his chest, Finch. A hulking man with a cruel sneer permanently etched on his face, was kicking at one of the cages. Get these worthless animals ready. Thorne wants them gone by midnight. No loose ends. A wave of cold. Pure rage washed over Alex. These were not worthless animals. These were brave, loyal K9s, discarded by a monster. This was the moment. Police don't move. Alex's voice, amplified by the cavernous space, echoed through the chamber, cutting through Finch's taunts like a knife. Finch and his men froze, then spun around, their faces contorting in surprise and then defiance. One of Finch's men instinctively reached for a weapon tucked into his waistband. Don't even think about it, Alex bellowed. Stepping out from cover, his own weapon drawn and aimed, his team emerged behind him, their tactical gear making them look formidable, their rifles leveled. Finch, recovering quickly, laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Well, Detective Thorne, come to collect your charity cases. You're a bit late, aren't you? These dogs are retired assets, private property. They're victims. Finch. Alex snarled, advancing slowly. And you, Thorne, and Maxwell are going to pay for every single one, as the standoff intensified. A new sound pierced the air, a low, guttural growl, followed by a series of sharp, urgent barks. It wasn't one of the caged K9s, it was a sound Alex knew intimately, from a darkened corridor leading into the research bay. a familiar shape emerged. Shadow. Alex's breath hitched. Dr. Reed had called him just hours ago, saying Shadow had escaped his kennel, likely drawn by the distant sirens and the familiar scent of Alex's patrol car during the convoy's departure. He must have followed them, driven by an instinct Alex couldn't comprehend. He looked thinner, his steps still a little wobbly, but his eyes, fixed on Alex, burned with a fierce loyalty that defied his physical weakness. Finch saw Shadow too, and a look of pure malice crossed his face. Well, look who it is. The ghost dog. Should have finished him off when I had the chance. He raised his hand, gesturing to one of his men. Get him. Put him down. The man lunged toward Shadow, but the old K9, despite his lingering weakness, was still a trained police dog. He dodged the clumsy attack, a low snarl rumbling in his chest. His eyes, though weary, were alight with his old spark. His focus entirely on protecting Alex. Shadow. No, stay back, Alex commanded, but the dog ignored him, driven by instinct. The distraction, however, was critical. As Finch's man fumbled with his weapon, Alex saw his opening. Now, he yelled to his team. Chaos erupted. Team A, having breached the main gate, stormed in from the opposite end of the bay, catching Finch and his men in a crossfire. Shots rang out, though carefully aimed to avoid hitting the dogs or Alex's team. Finch's men, surprised and outnumbered, quickly realized the futility of resistance. Finch, seeing his operation crumble, made a desperate dash towards a side door, but Shadow, with a burst of surprising speed, intercepted him, the K9 using every ounce of his remaining strength. Lunged, not attacking to injure, but to block and harry, circling Finch, nipping at his legs, forcing him to stumble. It was enough. An officer from Team A tackled Finch, bringing him down hard. The other K9s, seeing their opportunity, began to bark, a cacophony of fear and newfound hope. Animal control quickly moved in, their gentle, reassuring voices calming the traumatized dogs. They systematically opened the cages, carefully coaxing out Apollo and the others. Each dog, though wary, allowed themselves to be led to safety, sensing the shift in their fate. Within minutes, the facility was secured. Finch and his two armed men were handcuffed, their faces grim with defeat. The K9s were being carefully loaded into the animal control vans, their whines slowly turning into soft murmurs of relief. Alex knelt beside Shadow, who had collapsed, panting heavily, near Finch. "You crazy old dog," Alex whispered, running a hand over his head. "You came for me." Shadow licked his hand weakly, his tail giving a few faint thumps against the concrete. His eyes, though still tired, held a deep, unwavering affection. He had returned to his partner's side, even in his broken state, to help secure justice. It was the ultimate testament to his loyalty. Major Davies arrived, his face etched with a mixture of grim satisfaction and relief. "Well done, Thorne. You saved them all, and we caught Marcus Thorne's right-hand man. This is enough to bring the whole rotten tree down." The reckoning had begun. The truth, long buried, was now exposed. Thanks to the unwavering loyalty of a K9 and the relentless determination of his partner, the aftermath of the raid was swift and reverberating, sending shockwaves far beyond the condemned facility. Sarah Chen, ever present and ever prepared, had her team on site within minutes, capturing the harrowing scenes of the rescued K9s and the arrests of Finch and his men. The City Tribune ran the story as their lead headline, emblazoned across the front page with a haunting photo of the emaciated Shadow juxtaposed against a professional portrait of a smiling Marcus Thorne. Tycoon's cruelty. K9 heroes abandoned, the headline screamed, and the public reacted with a collective gasp of outrage. The images of the rescued K9s, particularly Shadow's emaciated frame and his eventual reunion with Alex, went viral. Social media exploded with calls for justice. Animal rights groups, veteran organizations, and ordinary citizens flooded the district attorney's office with demands for immediate action. The pressure was immense and undeniable. Marcus Thorne, alerted to Finch's arrest and the raid, tried desperately to leverage his influence. His high-powered lawyers immediately issued statements denying any knowledge of Finch's actions, painting him as a rogue employee. They attempted to discredit Alex, suggesting he had a vendetta, that he was emotionally compromised due to his attachment to Shadow. But their efforts were futile. Major Davies, a man of unwavering integrity, personally oversaw the departmental investigation into Captain Maxwell, faced with Alex's irrefutable evidence, corroborated by Maxwell's own admissions and the testimony of Frank Jenkins. Maxwell had no choice but to fully cooperate. He provided further details about Thorne's operations, hoping to mitigate his own sentence. Within 24 hours, Captain Robert Maxwell was stripped of his badge and placed under arrest, charged with obstruction of justice, aiding and abetting, and conspiracy to commit animal cruelty. His fall from grace was swift and absolute, a stark reminder that even those in positions of power were not immune to accountability. The district attorney, sensing the groundswell of public anger and armed with a mountain of evidence, moved decisively. The shell companies, the falsified adoption papers, the leaked emails, Finch's testimony, Maxwell's confession, and, most powerfully, the physical evidence of the abandoned, starving canines. It all painted an undeniable picture of Marcus Thorne's depravity. Thorne was arrested at his sprawling mansion. The image of his handcuffed hands splashed across every news channel. He was charged with multiple counts of extreme animal cruelty, conspiracy, fraud, and endangerment. The initial bail hearing saw the judge, clearly swayed by the overwhelming public sentiment and the severity of the charges, set an astronomically high bail, effectively keeping Thorne locked up. The trials were intense, drawing national media attention. Marcus Thorne's legal team, despite their best efforts, could not dismantle the mountain of evidence. Alex Thorne's testimony was particularly powerful. He spoke not just as a detective, but as a devoted partner, detailing Shadow's years of service, his harrowing discovery, and his slow, painful recovery. Dr. Evelyn Reed provided expert veterinary testimony, explaining the excruciating suffering Shadow and the other K9s had endured. The rescued dogs, now slowly regaining their health, were a silent, living testament to the cruelty. The jury, moved by the plight of the K9s and outraged by the calculated nature of the crimes, took only a few hours to deliver their verdict. Marcus Thorne was found guilty on all counts. Bartholomew Finch, after a plea bargain for his cooperation, received a lesser sentence but still faced significant jail time. Captain Maxwell, due to his cooperation and remorse, received a suspended sentence and was ordered to perform extensive community service. Though his career and reputation were irrevocably destroyed, the verdict was met with cheers from the public gathered outside the courthouse. Justice, in its truest form, had been served. In the wake of the scandal, public outcry led to significant legislative changes. Shadow's Law was swiftly enacted, a comprehensive bill mandating strict oversight for retired K9s, requiring mandatory follow-up checks, establishing dedicated K9 retirement facilities, and imposing severe penalties for animal cruelty against service animals. Funding was reallocated to ensure retired K9s received proper veterinary care and lifetime support. It was a victory not just for the dogs, but for the principle of compassion and accountability. As the dust settled, Alex visited Shadow at the clinic. His partner was still thin, but his eyes were bright, and his tail thumped a joyful rhythm against the floor. He was a survivor, a symbol of resilience, and the catalyst for a profound shift in public consciousness. The entire state, once shocked by the cruelty, was now united in its commitment to protecting these loyal heroes. The scandal, dark as it was, had ultimately brought about a powerful, positive change, proving that even in the face of grave injustice, good could and would prevail. Weeks turned into a month. Then, too, Shadow's recovery, though slow and arduous, was nothing short of miraculous. The initial skeletal frame began to fill out, muscle returning to his powerful limbs. His matted, dull fur regained its luxurious sheen, a testament to Dr. Reed's dedicated care and the endless supply of high-quality food. But more than the physical transformation, it was the return of his spirit that brought a lump to Alex's throat, the playful spark in his eyes, the confident wag of his tail, the familiar way he would nudge Alex's hand for affection. These were the true signs of Shadow's healing. Alex spent every spare moment at the clinic, sitting by Shadow's side, reading aloud from old dog-eared detective novels, or simply letting his hand rest on the warm fur of his partner. Their bond, once strong, was now unbreakable, forged in the crucible of despair and renewed in the fire of resilience. It was clear that Shadow thrived on Alex's presence, his barks growing more robust, his movements more energetic whenever his former handler walked into the room. The day Dr. Reed finally declared Shadow ready for a permanent home was a day of quiet celebration. He's still got a bit of weight to gain, detective, but his vitals are strong, and his spirit is back, she said, a smile gracing her lips. He's ready for retirement, a proper one this time. Alex didn't hesitate. He had already cleared it with Major Davies and the department. I'm adopting him, doctor, he stated, a deep satisfaction in his voice. Officially, he's coming home with me. The drive from the clinic to Alex's small, comfortable house was filled with a palpable sense of peace. Shadow, no longer a terrified, starving creature, lay contentedly on the back seat, his head resting on Alex's old uniform jacket, occasionally letting out a soft, contented sigh. When they arrived, Shadow sniffed cautiously at the unfamiliar surroundings. Then, with a joyful bark, bounded into the yard, exploring every corner with renewed vigor. Alex's home, once a silent refuge for a man haunted by absence, was now filled with the comforting sounds of a happy dog, the rhythmic tap of paws on hardwood floors, the gentle thumps of a wagging tail, the soft snores from the dog bed by the fireplace. Alex installed a sturdy dog run in the backyard, but Shadow rarely used it, preferring to be wherever Alex was, a constant, comforting presence. Their morning runs in the park resumed, though at a gentler pace, and the simple act of throwing a tennis ball filled Alex with a joy he hadn't felt in years, beyond their personal reunion. The scandal had ignited a passion within Alex. He couldn't let Shadow's suffering be in vain. Working closely with Sarah Chen, whose articles continued to expose the systemic issues and champion the cause of canine welfare, they began to channel the public's outrage into meaningful action. We need a foundation, Alex, Sarah had insisted. Something concrete, long-lasting, to ensure this never happens again. And so, the Shadow and Apollo K9 Retirement Foundation was born. Alex, using his newfound public platform as the hero detective who saved his partner, became its unlikely public face. Sarah leveraged her media connections, securing grants and donations. The foundation's mission was clear: to provide a safe, loving, and permanent retirement for every K9 service dog, ensuring they received proper medical care, comfortable homes, and the dignity they deserved after years of service. The public response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from across the state, from individuals, businesses, and even other police departments eager to implement better practices. Volunteers offered their time, their homes, their skills. The foundation quickly gained traction, becoming a beacon of hope for retired K9s everywhere. One of their first initiatives was to track down and provide support for other K9s who had fallen through the cracks. Thanks to Jenkins's list and Sarah's continued investigations, they managed to locate several other dogs who had been abandoned or were living in precarious situations due to Thorne's scheme. These dogs, too, were rescued, rehabilitated, and placed in loving homes. Their stories of recovery adding to the Foundation's growing legacy. The new beginning wasn't just for Shadow, it was for Alex, too. The hollow ache in his chest was gone, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. He continued his work as a detective. But now, his off-duty hours were dedicated to the Foundation, to ensuring no other K-9 suffered the fate that had befallen his beloved partner. Shadow, now a therapy dog for the Foundation, often accompanied Alex to events, a living testament to the power of resilience and the enduring bond between a human and his loyal companion. Their story, once a tale of betrayal and suffering, had blossomed into a powerful narrative of redemption and hope. Months later, the former site of Marcus Thorne's condemned animal testing facility had undergone a profound transformation. Where once stood crumbling walls and the stench of despair, now rose the Harmony Creek K-9 Sanctuary, a testament to resilience, compassion, and the power of collective action. The expansive grounds, meticulously cleared and renovated, were a verdant paradise for retired police and military dogs. Green fields stretched out, dotted with new, spacious kennels, state-of-the-art veterinary facilities, and even a sprawling agility course. Alex Thorne often brought Shadow there, his old partner, now fully recovered and radiating calm. Trotted beside him, his tail swaying in a slow, rhythmic wag. Shadow's fur was thick and gleaming, his eyes bright with contentment. He was still a dignified old K-9, but the haunted look of starvation had vanished, replaced by an inner peace that resonated with every gentle nudge of his head against Alex's leg. They walked past dogs of all breeds and sizes, each one a retired hero, now living out their golden years in comfort and safety. There was Apollo, the powerful narcotics dog, his once skeletal frame now robust, playing fetch with a volunteer. Nearby, an old Malinois, a former explosives detection dog, dozed peacefully in a patch of sunlight, surrounded by other canine companions. These were the dogs Shadow's Law had saved, the beneficiaries of a public conscience awakened by one loyal German shepherd's harrowing journey. The Harmony Creek K-9 Sanctuary was more than just a place. It was a symbol. It stood as a permanent reminder that loyalty, service, and life itself deserved respect and protection. Long after the call of duty had faded, the scandal of Marcus Thorne, while a dark chapter had ultimately paved the way for this brighter future, it had exposed the rot, forced accountability, and spurred a fundamental change in how the state viewed and cared for its four-legged heroes. Alex often reflected on the journey. The initial shock of finding Shadow, the burning fury at the injustice, the relentless pursuit of truth alongside Sarah Chen, and the ultimate victory in the courtroom. It had been a grueling, emotionally draining fight, one that had tested his resolve and pushed him to the brink. But seeing Shadow now, truly at peace, and witnessing the thriving sanctuary, he knew every ounce of effort had been worth it. Sarah, now a celebrated investigative journalist, had moved on to other powerful stories. But the K-9 scandal remained a highlight of her career. She often visited the sanctuary, documenting its growth, sharing the stories of the rescued dogs, and ensuring public engagement remained strong. She and Alex had forged an unbreakable friendship, bound by their shared fight for justice, the foundation they had established. The Shadow and Apollo K-9 Retirement Foundation continued to flourish, its reach now extended nationwide, inspiring similar initiatives in other states. They raised funds, advocated for stronger legislation, and provided grants to struggling K-9 programs. Alex, while still a dedicated detective, balanced his professional duties with his unwavering commitment to the foundation. He often gave talks, sharing Shadow's story, his voice a powerful testament to the bond between handler and dog, and the importance of never forgetting those who serve. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the sanctuary, Alex sat on a bench, Shadow's head resting comfortably on his lap. He scratched behind Shadow's ears, feeling the contented rumble of a purr. The dog looked up at him, his wise, brown eyes full of an unspoken gratitude and affection. "We did it, boy," Alex murmured, his voice soft. "We saved them all." Shadow let out a soft sigh, as if in agreement. The journey had begun with a devastating betrayal. A loyal K-9 found starving and abandoned, but through one detective's unwavering dedication, one journalist's fearless pursuit of truth, and the indomitable spirit of a forgotten hero named Shadow, justice had been served. A dark secret had been brought into the light, leading to a legacy of compassion and hope that would benefit countless K-9s for generations to come. The good had, indeed, prevailed.